I always knew I was the spare tire in my family's perfect car. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and for 28 years, I lived in the shadow of my younger sister Sofia, the golden child who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Growing up in a traditional Mexican-American household in San Antonio, Texas, I learned early that love was conditional, distributed based on achievements, beauty, and how well you could make the family look good to the outside world. Sofia was born with all the gifts that apparently mattered. She was naturally beautiful with our mother's delicate features and our father's striking green eyes. I inherited our grandmother's broader nose and my father's stocky build, earning me the nickname Gordita from relatives who thought it was endearing. Sofia excelled in school without trying, while I struggled with dyslexia that went undiagnosed for years because my parents assumed I was just lazy. When Sofia started dancing at age 5, she moved like liquid grace. When I tried to join her classes, my mother gently suggested I might be better suited for something less visible. The pattern established itself early and never wavered. Sofia's achievements were celebrated with elaborate parties, expensive gifts, and endless social media posts. When she made the high school cheerleading team, my parents threw a backyard celebration for 50 people. When I made the honor roll for the first time after years of tutoring and medication for my learning disability, my mother said she was proud but forgot to mention it to anyone else. Sofia's bedroom looked like a princess suite with custom furniture and a walk-in closet. I shared a cramped room with my cousin Maria when she stayed with us during her parents' divorce. The financial disparity became more obvious as we got older. Sofia received a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday, complete with custom paint and leather seats. For my 16th birthday, my parents gave me the keys to my father's old work truck, a battered Ford with transmission problems and a broken air conditioner. They promised to help me save for something better, but that help never materialized because Sofia needed money for dance competitions, private coaching, and her college applications to prestigious schools. When Sofia announced she wanted to study dance at Juilliard, my parents liquidated their retirement savings and took out a second mortgage on the house. The cost was astronomical, but they never hesitated. When I was accepted to the University of Texas with a partial scholarship for social work, they congratulated me but explained they couldn't help with the remaining costs. I worked 3 jobs throughout college, often falling asleep in the library between shifts at the campus bookstore, a local restaurant, and weekend cleaning services. The emotional neglect cut deeper than the financial inequality. Sofia's problems were family emergencies that required immediate attention and resources. When she struggled with anxiety during her freshman year at Juilliard, my parents flew to New York monthly and hired the best therapists money could buy. When I had a severe panic attack during my senior year of college while juggling work and a full course load, my mother told me to try chamomile tea and get more sleep. Sofia's relationships were treated like soap opera storylines that captivated the entire family. When she dated different boys in high school, my parents would invite them over for elaborate dinners and treat them like potential sons-in-law. When she had her heart broken by her dance partner during sophomore year of college, my mother flew to New York to comfort her and bring her home for a week of recovery. When I went through a painful breakup with my college boyfriend of 2 years, my parents barely acknowledged it happened. After college, I moved back home temporarily while Sofia remained in New York pursuing her dance career. My parents subsidized her expensive Manhattan apartment while I paid rent to live in my childhood bedroom. Every conversation at dinner revolved around Sofia's auditions, performances, and the important people she was meeting. My work as a social worker with at-risk teenagers was seen as noble, but unremarkable. When Sofia called during dinner, everything stopped so we could hear about her day on speakerphone. The pattern continued into our 20s. Sofia's dance career had modest success, a few small roles in off-Broadway productions and some commercial work, but my parents spoke about her as if she was starring in Broadway shows. They attended every performance, no matter how minor, and documented everything on social media with captions about their talented daughter following her dreams. Meanwhile, I was building a solid career in social work, earning recognition for my innovative programs helping teenagers aging out of foster care, but my achievements were mentioned in passing, if at all. The financial support for Sofia never ended. Even as she approached her mid-20s, my parents continued to supplement her income, pay for her dance classes, and fund her lifestyle in one of the world's most expensive cities. When I bought my first car with my own money after years of saving, my parents barely acknowledged the milestone. When Sofia decided she wanted to take a 3-month intensive dance program in Paris, they found the money without question. I began to recognize the pattern of emotional manipulation that kept me trapped in this dynamic. Whenever I tried to address the inequality, My parents would either deny it existed or make me feel guilty for being jealous of my sister. My mother would remind me that Sofia was more fragile and needed more support. My father would lecture me about family loyalty and how successful families supported each other's dreams. They positioned my resentment as a character flaw rather than a legitimate response to years of unequal treatment. The breaking point came during Sofia's 26th birthday celebration. My parents decided to throw her a surprise party at an expensive restaurant, inviting 40 people and spending more money than I earned in 2 months. They asked me to contribute financially to the party, despite knowing I was saving for a down payment on my first apartment. When I explained I couldn't afford to contribute much, my mother guilt-tripped me about not supporting my sister's special day. I contributed what I could, eating ramen noodles for 2 weeks to make it work. The party was elaborate and beautiful, with professional decorations, a custom cake, and an open bar. Sofia looked stunning and gracious, thanking everyone for coming. During the toasts, my parents spoke about their pride in Sofia's courage to follow her dreams and their gratitude for having such a talented daughter. Extended family members praised Sofia's beauty, talent, and ambition. Then my Aunt Carmen, my mother's sister, stood up to speak. She had always been more observant than the others, less willing to go along with family mythology. She looked around the room and said she wanted to acknowledge both daughters my parents had raised. She talked about Sofia's artistic talents, but then she turned to me and spoke about my dedication to helping vulnerable children, my work ethic, and the way I had put myself through college while maintaining good grades and building a meaningful career. The room became uncomfortable. My parents looked embarrassed that attention was being directed toward me during Sofia's celebration. My mother quickly stood up to redirect the conversation back to Sofia, but something had shifted inside me during my aunt's speech. For the first time in years, someone had acknowledged my worth and achievements in public. The contrast with my parents' reaction was stark and painful. After the party, as we cleaned up at home, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. She was angry about my aunt's speech, claiming it had been inappropriate to steal focus from Sofia's birthday. She accused me of somehow orchestrating the moment to make myself the center of attention. The accusation was so unfair and hurtful that I finally snapped. I told my mother that I had done nothing wrong and that maybe it was healthy for someone to acknowledge that I existed and had value too. My mother's response revealed the depth of her favoritism and the extent to which she had convinced herself it was justified. She told me that Sofia was special, that her talents were rare and precious, and that the family needed to support her dreams. She said I was stable and successful, implying that meant I needed less support and attention. When I asked why Sofia deserved more financial support despite being older than me, my mother explained that artistic careers were more precarious and required more family investment. When I pointed out that I had worked multiple jobs to put myself through school while Sofia's education was fully funded, my mother said that Sofia's education was an investment in her talent. When I mentioned that my work helping at-risk youth was also meaningful and deserving of recognition, my mother acknowledged it was important but said it wasn't the same as pursuing artistic excellence. The conversation continued for over an hour, with me finally articulating years of accumulated hurt and my mother defending every decision with rationalizations that became increasingly desperate. She insisted that they loved both daughters equally, but that equal love didn't mean identical treatment. She claimed that I was being selfish for wanting the same level of support as Sofia when our paths were so different. The moment that broke me was when my mother said that Sofia had always been more delicate and sensitive, requiring more protection and care, while I had always been strong and independent. She meant it as an explanation, perhaps even a compliment, but I heard it as the core truth of our family dynamic. I had been punished for my strength by being given more responsibility and less support. Sofia had been rewarded for her perceived fragility with endless accommodation and resources. I realized that night that nothing would ever change. My parents had constructed an entire belief system to justify their favoritism, and they would never acknowledge the harm it had caused me. They genuinely believed they were good parents who had raised 2 successful daughters, and they saw my pain as ingratitude rather than a legitimate response to years of unequal treatment. The next morning, I made the decision that would change my life. I found an apartment across town and put down a deposit using money from my small savings account. I gave my parents 2 weeks' notice that I would be moving out, explaining that I needed my own space to continue building my career and life. They were confused by my sudden decision, having no awareness that our conversation the night before had been a turning point for me. Moving out was harder than I expected, not because of logistics but because of the emotional weight of finally accepting that my family would never give me what I needed. For years, I had hoped that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, or waited long enough, my parents would recognize my worth and treat me with the same love and support they showed Sofia. Leaving meant abandoning that hope and accepting that their love came with conditions I could never meet. The first few months in my own apartment were lonely and difficult. I had built my entire identity around being the reliable daughter who never complained and always managed on her own. Without that role to play, I felt lost and uncertain about who I was supposed to be. I started therapy with Drive. Michelle Torres, a counselor who specialized in family dynamics and who helped me understand that my experience was a form of emotional neglect that had shaped my self-worth in profound ways. Through therapy, I began to understand the psychological impact of growing up as the unfavored child. I had learned to minimize my own needs, to work twice as hard for half the recognition, and to accept crumbs of affection as if they were full meals. I had developed a harsh inner critic that constantly compared me to Sofia and found me wanting. I had internalized my parents' message that I was less deserving of love, attention, and resources. Drive. Torres helped me recognize that my parents' treatment of me was not a reflection of my worth but of their own limitations and biases. She explained that some parents unconsciously favor children who remind them of themselves or who fulfill their own unfulfilled dreams. Sofia represented beauty, artistry, and a glamorous lifestyle that my parents admired. I represented stability, hard work, and service to others, which they valued in theory but found less exciting in practice. The work of rebuilding my self-worth was slow and painful. I had to learn to recognize and challenge the negative thoughts that had become automatic responses to any success or failure. When I received a promotion at work, my first instinct was to minimize it or assume I didn't deserve it. When I made mistakes, I catastrophized them as proof that I was fundamentally flawed. Drive. Torres taught me to notice these patterns and replace them with more balanced perspectives. I also began to set boundaries with my family for the first time in my life. When my parents called expecting me to drop everything to help with Sofia's latest crisis or celebration, I started saying no when it didn't work for my schedule. When family conversations became entirely focused on Sofia's life, I would redirect them to include other topics or politely excuse myself. When my parents made their casual comparisons between Sofia and me, I pointed out the impact of their words rather than silently absorbing them. The boundaries were met with resistance and confusion from my parents. They accused me of being distant and difficult, unable to understand why I was suddenly less available and accommodating. They missed the daughter who never complained and always said yes, and they struggled to adjust to my new assertiveness. Some family members suggested I was going through a phase or being influenced by my therapist to turn against my family. During this period, I focused intensely on building a life that reflected my own values and interests rather than my family's expectations. I threw myself into my work with renewed passion, developing innovative programs that gained attention from other agencies and advocacy groups. I started taking art classes for fun, something I had never felt permission to do while growing up in Sofia's artistic shadow. I traveled alone for the first time, taking weekend trips to nearby cities and eventually planning a solo vacation to Colorado. I also began building relationships with people who saw and appreciated me for who I truly was. I joined a hiking group and discovered a love for outdoor activities that I had never had time to explore while working multiple jobs. I volunteered with literacy programs, finding deep satisfaction in helping adults learn to read. I started dating again, approaching relationships with a new understanding of my own worth and clear boundaries about how I deserved to be treated. The most challenging part of my transformation was learning to manage the guilt that came with prioritizing my own needs. I had been conditioned to believe that good daughters sacrificed themselves for their families, and choosing my own well-being felt selfish and wrong. Drive. Torres helped me understand that self-care was not selfish but necessary, and that I could love my family while still protecting myself from their harmful patterns. About a year after moving out, Sofia's dance career hit a rough patch. She was struggling to book work and feeling discouraged about her prospects in New York. As always, my parents mobilized all their resources to support her through the crisis. They increased their financial support, flew to New York to help her find a new agent, and encouraged her to consider moving back home temporarily to regroup. In the past, I would have been expected to participate in the family emergency, offering emotional support and perhaps financial help despite my own limited resources. This time, I acknowledged Sofia's struggles with appropriate sympathy but maintained my boundaries. When my parents asked me to contribute to a fund they were creating to help Sofia through her difficult period, I politely declined, explaining that I had my own financial goals I was working toward. My refusal to participate in the usual family crisis management triggered the biggest confrontation I had ever had with my parents. They accused me of being cold and selfish, abandoning my sister when she needed family support. They said they were disappointed in the person I had become and didn't understand why I had turned my back on family values. My mother cried and said she felt like she was losing both daughters, one to career struggles and one to stubbornness. The confrontation was painful but also clarifying. I realized that my parents were incapable of seeing me as a separate person with legitimate needs and boundaries. In their minds, I existed to support Sofia and make the family function smoothly. My attempts at independence and self-advocacy were interpreted as betrayal rather than healthy development. I stood my ground during the confrontation, explaining calmly that I loved my family but could no longer participate in dynamics that were harmful to my well-being. I told them that I had my own life to build and that I couldn't continue to sacrifice my goals to fund Sofia's dreams. I acknowledged that Sofia was struggling but pointed out that she was an adult who needed to develop her own resources for dealing with setbacks. My parents responded with a mixture of threats and manipulation tactics that revealed the depth of their investment in maintaining the status quo. They threatened to cut me off financially, not realizing that I had been essentially financially independent for years anyway. They suggested that I was being influenced by outside forces and needed to remember my family obligations. They accused me of being jealous and unable to celebrate Sofia's talents. The conversation ended with my father declaring that if I wasn't willing to support my family, perhaps I should consider whether I really belonged in it. The threat was meant to bring me back in line, but instead it confirmed that my decision to create distance had been correct. I told them that I would always love them but that I needed space to build my own life, and that their love shouldn't be conditional on my willingness to sacrifice myself for Sofia. The months that followed were difficult as my relationship with my parents became increasingly strained. They made several attempts to guilt me into returning to my old role, including having Sofia call me directly to ask for help and having relatives reach out to convince me to be more supportive. Each attempt strengthened my resolve and confirmed that I had made the right decision. Sofia herself seemed genuinely confused by my withdrawal from the family dynamic. She had never had to consider the cost of her privileged position, because it had always been presented as natural and deserved. When she called to ask why I was being distant, I tried to explain my perspective, but she struggled to understand how my parents' support for her could be harmful to me. She saw their financial help as love and couldn't comprehend why I would resent it. During our conversation, Sofia revealed the extent to which she had internalized our parents' narratives about our family. She genuinely believed that she was more fragile and needed more support, and that I was naturally stronger and more independent. She had never questioned why she deserved more resources or recognition, and she seemed hurt that I was challenging the family dynamics that had always worked in her favor. I realized that Sofia was as much a victim of our parents' favoritism as I was, though in different ways. She had been taught to see herself as special but fragile, deserving of support but incapable of true independence. She had never learned to cope with failure or rejection because our parents had always intervened to smooth her path. As her dance career struggled, she was discovering that the real world didn't share our parents' assessment of her exceptional nature. 2 years into my journey of independence, I received news that my father had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The diagnosis triggered a family crisis that tested all the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. My mother called me in tears, begging me to come home and help manage the situation. Sofia flew back from New York immediately, and extended family members rallied to provide support. I visited my father in the hospital and made it clear that I cared about his health and recovery. However, I refused to move back home temporarily or take on the caretaking responsibilities that my mother automatically assigned to me. I offered specific help that I could provide while maintaining my own life, such as driving him to certain appointments or helping research treatment options. I also suggested that Sofia, who had moved back home, could take on more of the day-to-day responsibilities. My response to the family crisis revealed how much I had changed and how much my family expected me to remain the same. My parents were shocked that I didn't immediately abandon my own life to manage theirs. They had assumed that a serious illness would override all my boundaries and return me to my old role as the family problem solver. When I maintained my limits while still offering appropriate support, they accused me of being heartless and selfish. The experience also revealed how little my family had learned about functioning without me as their emotional and logistical safety net. My mother had no idea how to navigate insurance paperwork or coordinate care because I had always handled those responsibilities. Sofia was willing to help but lacked the practical skills because she had never been expected to develop them. They were forced to learn systems and develop capabilities they had taken for granted when I was available to manage everything. My father's illness also created opportunities for different kinds of conversations between us. During one of my visits, he acknowledged that he was proud of my career and the life I had built. He admitted that he sometimes worried about Sofia's ability to take care of herself and envied my independence and strength. These conversations didn't undo years of favoritism, but they helped me understand that my parents' limitations came from their own fears and insecurities rather than malicious intent. As my father recovered, the family gradually adjusted to a new normal that included my boundaries and reduced availability. My parents began relying more on Sofia for practical support, which was challenging for her but ultimately healthy. She was forced to develop adult skills she had never needed before and to take responsibility for aspects of family life that had always been handled by others. Sofia and I also began developing a different kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than the old dynamic of me supporting her while receiving little in return. She started asking about my work and life in genuine ways, showing interest in my perspective rather than just expecting me to listen to her problems. She began acknowledging the inequality in our upbringing and expressing appreciation for sacrifices I had made that she was only now recognizing. 3 years after moving out of my parents' house, I was promoted to director of my agency, a position that came with significant responsibility and recognition in my field. The promotion was the result of years of hard work and innovation, and it represented the kind of professional achievement I had always dreamed of. When I called to tell my parents about the promotion, their response revealed how much our relationship had shifted. My mother congratulated me warmly and asked detailed questions about my new responsibilities. My father expressed pride in my accomplishments and mentioned my promotion to several relatives and family friends. For the first time in my life, my achievements were being celebrated and shared in the way Sofia's had always been. The change wasn't dramatic or complete, but it represented a meaningful shift in how my parents saw and valued my contributions. The promotion also brought me confidence and recognition that helped heal some of the wounds from years of being overlooked. My colleagues and community partners saw me as a leader and innovator, and their respect helped me internalize a more positive sense of my own capabilities. I realized that the recognition I had always craved from my parents was less important now that I had built a professional identity based on my own merits and achievements. Around the same time, I met David, a social worker who shared my passion for helping vulnerable populations. David had grown up in a healthy family where children were treated with equal love and respect, and he struggled initially to understand the dynamics I described from my own upbringing. His perspective helped me see how abnormal my family's patterns had been and how much progress I had made in establishing healthier relationships. Dating David also forced me to confront ways that my upbringing had affected my approach to relationships. I had a tendency to overgive and underask, replicating the family pattern where my needs were secondary to everyone else's. I struggled to believe that someone could love me without my having to earn it through constant service and accommodation. David's consistent, unconditional care helped me learn to accept love without feeling obligated to prove my worth. Our relationship progressed slowly as I learned to trust that David's feelings for me were genuine and stable. He admired my dedication to my work, my independence, and my strength, seeing these qualities as attractive rather than threatening. He also encouraged me to pursue interests and dreams that I had suppressed for years, supporting my desire to travel more extensively and eventually return to school for an advanced degree. 4 years after beginning my journey toward independence, Sofia made a major decision that surprised everyone. She announced that she was leaving the dance world and returning to school to become a physical therapist. Her decision was met with shock and disappointment from my parents, who saw it as giving up on her dreams. For the first time, Sofia was experiencing the kind of parental disappointment that I had lived with for years. Sofia's career change forced my parents to confront their investment in her dance career and their belief that she was destined for artistic greatness. They had spent enormous amounts of money and emotional energy supporting a dream that Sofia herself was abandoning. The situation created tension in the family as my parents struggled to accept that their golden child was choosing a practical career over artistic pursuit. I found myself in the unexpected position of supporting Sofia's decision while my parents criticized it. I had learned through my own experience that choosing a path aligned with your own values and interests was more important than fulfilling other people's dreams. I encouraged Sofia to pursue what made her happy rather than what made our parents proud. My support meant a great deal to her during a difficult transition period. Sofia's career change also revealed how much she had grown and changed since I had stepped back from my old family role. She had developed more realistic perspectives about her talents and ambitions, and she had learned to make decisions based on her own assessments rather than our parents' expectations. She admitted that she had never been as passionate about dance as everyone assumed, but that she had felt trapped by the family's investment in her success. The shift in family dynamics continued as Sofia established herself in her new career path. She excelled in her physical therapy program, finding fulfillment in helping people recover from injuries and improve their physical function. Her success in a practical, service-oriented field earned my respect and admiration in ways that her dance career never had. I realized that I had always resented not Sofia herself, but the preferential treatment she received, and that I could genuinely celebrate her achievements when they came from her own efforts rather than family favoritism. My parents gradually adjusted to having two daughters in helping professions rather than one artist and one social worker. They began to see similarities between Sofia's physical therapy work and my social work that they had never noticed before. Both careers involved helping vulnerable people improve their lives, both required compassion and dedication, and both provided meaning beyond financial rewards. For the first time, my parents spoke about both daughters in similar terms, acknowledging that we had both chosen meaningful paths. 5 years after my journey began, I reached a milestone that represented the culmination of my hard work and determination. I was accepted into a doctoral program in social work at a prestigious university, with full funding and a research assistantship. The achievement was entirely my own, earned through years of building expertise, conducting research, and establishing myself as a leader in my field. When I received the acceptance letter, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that was completely independent of my family's approval or recognition. I called my parents to share the news, and their response exceeded my expectations. Both my mother and father expressed genuine excitement and pride in my achievement. They asked thoughtful questions about my research interests and future plans. My mother even posted about my acceptance on social media, something she had never done for my achievements before. The recognition felt meaningful because it was genuine rather than obligatory. The doctoral program required me to relocate to another state, creating even more physical distance between me and my family. However, the emotional distance I had created over the previous years made the physical separation easier to manage. I had built a life and identity that were independent of my family's approval, and I felt confident about maintaining our improved relationship from afar. Before leaving for graduate school, I had a final conversation with my parents that helped bring closure to our long journey toward a healthier relationship. My mother acknowledged that she and my father had made mistakes in how they treated Sofia and me differently. She admitted that they had been so focused on what they saw as Sofia's special needs that they had failed to recognize my needs and achievements. She expressed regret for the pain their favoritism had caused and appreciation for my perseverance despite their failures. My father was more reserved in his acknowledgement but expressed pride in the woman I had become. He said that my strength and independence were qualities he admired and that he was sorry it had taken him so long to recognize my worth. He also admitted that he worried about whether Sofia would develop the same resilience and self-reliance that I had shown throughout my life. These conversations didn't erase the pain of years of unequal treatment, but they provided validation that my perceptions had been accurate and my responses had been justified. My parents' ability to acknowledge their mistakes, even partially, represented growth on their part and healing for our relationship. I realized that I no longer needed their validation to feel worthy, but receiving it still meant something to me. As I prepared to begin my doctoral studies, I reflected on the transformation I had undergone since that night of Sofia's birthday party 5 years earlier. I had learned to value myself independent of my family's approval, to set boundaries that protected my well-being, and to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided giving. I had discovered interests and capabilities that had been suppressed during years of playing the supporting role in my family's drama. Most importantly, I had learned that love should not require the sacrifice of one's own dreams and dignity. Healthy families support all members in pursuing their goals and recognize the unique value that each person brings. My family had been unable to provide that support during my younger years, but my determination to create a different life had ultimately led to positive changes for everyone involved. My relationship with Sofia had evolved into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared values. She had grown from a self-centered young woman into a thoughtful adult who understood the cost of privilege and worked to earn her achievements through her own efforts. We spoke regularly about our careers, relationships, and goals, and I felt proud of the person she had become through her own struggles and growth. The work I was pursuing in my doctoral program focused on family systems and the impact of favoritism on child development. My personal experience had given me insights that I hope to use to help other families recognize and address harmful patterns before they caused lasting damage. I wanted to ensure that other children wouldn't have to endure what I had experienced or work as hard as I had to recover their sense of worth and dignity. Looking toward the future, I felt optimistic about my continued growth and the possibilities ahead of me. I had learned that I was capable of achieving success through my own efforts and that I deserved relationships that were balanced and supportive. I had discovered interests in research and policy that excited me, and that could lead to meaningful contributions to my field. I had found love with someone who valued me for who I truly was rather than what I could provide. The girl who had once believed she was worth less than her sister had become a woman who knew her own value and insisted that others recognize it too. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led me to a life that was authentically mine, filled with relationships and achievements that reflected my true self rather than my family's expectations or limitations. I had learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is refusing to accept treatment that diminishes you. By insisting on my own worth and walking away from dynamics that harmed me, I had forced my family to confront their own patterns and grow in ways they might never have otherwise. The love we shared now was healthier and more honest than it had ever been when I was sacrificing myself to maintain peace. My story was proof that it is never too late to reclaim your life and rewrite your family's narrative. The courage to set boundaries and demand better treatment can transform not only your own life but the lives of those around you. I had stopped being a victim of my family's favoritism and become the author of my own story, one that was still being written with each choice I made to value and protect myself. As I packed my belongings for graduate school, I felt grateful for the painful journey that had led me to this moment. Every sacrifice I had made to put myself through college, every boundary I had set with my family, every moment of loneliness as I built my independence had contributed to my ability to pursue this dream. I was no longer the overlooked daughter trying to earn scraps of attention. I was Drive, Elena Rodriguez in training, a researcher and advocate who would use her voice to help others find their own worth and power. The future stretched ahead of me, full of possibilities that were entirely my own to explore and claim.